The moment the most powerful man in the room stopped listening to everyone else, he was looking at her. The crystal chandeliers of the Whitestone Grand Hotel cast warm gold across the ballroom, turning champagne glasses into tiny mirrors and polished marble into sheets of light. The annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala was already in full swing. Billionaires laughed beside city officials. Investors exchanged quiet promises near the bar, and cameras flashed every few seconds beneath the towering floral arrangements imported from California that morning. Clara Whitmore barely noticed any of it. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows at the edge of the room, balancing a stack of event folders against her chest while checking seating updates on her tablet. Her white blouse was neatly pressed, but the cuffs were beginning to fade. The silver watch on her wrist had stopped working months ago. She still wore it anyway. Across the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted before anyone announced him. Conversations softened. Shoulders straightened. Eyes turned. Adrian Moretti entered without hurry. Dark suit. No tie. One hand in his pocket. He didn't need introductions. Power moved with him naturally, quietly, like gravity. Men who negotiated million-dollar deals lowered their voices when he passed. Women glanced twice and looked away. Adrian had come for business. 10 minutes. One conversation. Leave. That was the plan. Then he saw her. Not the donors. Not the executives surrounding the stage. Her. The girl by the window with tired eyes and a folder slipping from her arm. Clara bent quickly as papers scattered onto the polished floor. A few guests stepped around her without stopping. One executive frowned as though she had interrupted the room simply by existing. Careful, he muttered under his breath while adjusting his cufflinks. Clara apologized immediately, even though it wasn't her fault. Adrian didn't move. He simply watched. Something inside him went still. She knelt to gather the pages, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. A small blue notebook slipped from between the folders and landed open beside her. He caught only a glimpse before she picked it up. Pencil sketches, shelves, lamps, a small storefront with handwritten words above the entrance. A bookstore. The executive beside Clara sighed impatiently. Whitmore, the donor packets should have been upstairs 5 minutes ago. I'm sorry, she said softly. I'm taking them now. She stood immediately, hugging the folders tighter. The notebook disappeared beneath her arm. Adrian's gaze remained fixed on the empty spot where she had been kneeling. Mr. Moretti? Someone asked beside him. The board members are waiting. He didn't answer right away. Across the room, Clara pushed open a side door leading toward the service hallway, her shoulders slightly lowered once she thought no one was looking. Adrian finally spoke, his eyes still on that door. Delay the meeting. The man beside him blinked. Sir. Adrian turned slowly. His expression was unreadable. I said delay it. And for the first time in years, Adrian Moretti walked away from power because he wanted to know the name of the girl nobody else saw. The gala ended long after midnight, but Clara Whitmore was still awake. The subway rattled beneath Manhattan as she sat near the window with her coat folded across her lap and the blue notebook resting in her hands. Most passengers stared at their phones. A man slept against the opposite door. The city outside blurred into streaks of yellow and silver. Clara opened the notebook carefully. The page from earlier was still there. Pencil sketches of bookshelves. Hanging lights. A reading corner beside a fireplace. At the top she had written in small letters, Whitmore Literary House. She smiled for only a second before her phone vibrated. The smile disappeared immediately. The message was from the pharmacy. Prescription refill due tomorrow. She closed her eyes. The train stopped in Queens just after 12:30. Clara walked 4 blocks through quiet streets lined with brick buildings and old trees. Apartment 3B sat above a laundromat that never seemed to close. Inside, the air smelled faintly of detergent and tea. Her mother was asleep on the couch under a knitted blanket. The television played softly with the volume turned low. Clara adjusted the blanket over her shoulders and placed the medicine bottles in order on the coffee table before heading into her room. The room was barely larger than a storage office. 1 bed, 1 lamp, a second-hand desk beneath the window. On the wall above it she had taped bookstore photographs cut from magazines over the years. Portland, Boston, Seattle, places she had never seen. At 6:30 the next morning, she was already back in Manhattan. The Hawthorne office occupied 4 floors of a glass tower downtown, but Clara worked mostly in places nobody noticed. Storage rooms, copy stations, filing areas. She delivered documents, updated schedules, fixed mistakes, and stayed late when everyone else went home. By 11 that morning, she was carrying supply boxes toward the archive room when voices stopped her outside the partially open door. "Whitmore's still working both jobs?" someone asked with a laugh. "Apparently. Office here and bookstore at night. I do not know how she does it." Another voice answered quietly. "Probably because she has to." Clara stood still for 1 second. Then she kept walking. Lunch was coffee and a granola bar at her desk. During break, she opened her blue notebook again. Between the sketches was a pressed white flower inside a bookmark she had made years ago with her father. One petal had started fading. She traced it gently with her finger. "Still drawing that bookstore?" a coworker asked while passing by. Clara smiled softly. "Always. You should stop dreaming and marry rich." Clara laughed under her breath. "I think I will keep the bookstore." That evening, she changed clothes in the employee restroom before walking 6 blocks to Bellamy Books on Lexington Avenue. The little store smelled like paper, coffee, and rain even when it had not rained. Clara tied on her apron and began shelving returns. Near closing time, the bell above the entrance rang softly. She looked up automatically. A man stepped inside wearing a dark coat and no expression at all. Adrian Moretti paused just beyond the doorway while his eyes moved across the shelves. Then they found her. The bell above the bookstore door chimed softly as Adrian stepped inside, bringing a breath of cold November air with him. Clara looked up only for a moment before returning to the stack of novels in her hands. He looked different from the gala. No tailored suit that commanded attention. No crowd around him. Just a dark wool coat, jeans, and the quiet expression of a man who wanted to disappear. Bellamy Books was nearly empty at that hour. A jazz playlist drifted from the speakers overhead while rain tapped lightly against the front windows. Clara placed 3 paperbacks onto a shelf and smiled politely. "Can I help you find something?" Adrian glanced around the store before answering. "Maybe." His voice was lower than she remembered from the ballroom. Softer somehow. "I am looking for a gift." Clara stepped closer. "For someone special?" Adrian looked at her for 1 second too long. "I do not know yet." Clara laughed lightly, not understanding the answer. She moved toward the fiction section. "What kind of books do they like?" Adrian followed her between the shelves lined with worn hardcovers and handwritten recommendation cards. "I do not know that either." She turned back with an amused smile. "You really came prepared." For the first time that day, something almost like a smile touched his face. Clara pulled a novel from the shelf and handed it to him. "Then start with stories about people finding things they did not know they needed." Adrian accepted the book but did not look at it. He was looking at her hands instead. The faint pencil marks on her fingers. The small paper bookmark sticking out of her apron pocket. "You draw," he said quietly. Clara blinked. "How did you know?" "Your hands." She glanced down and laughed again. "Occupational hazard." He lowered his eyes to the bookmark. A pressed white flower rested inside the clear sleeve. "That is beautiful." Her expression softened immediately. "My father made it with me when I was 16. Silence settled between them for a moment. Outside, headlights passed across the rain-dark street. Clara carefully adjusted a crooked display table. "What about you?" she asked. "Do you read?" Adrian looked around the bookstore as if searching for an answer among the shelves. "Not enough. You should fix that." "Maybe I will." Near closing time, he brought only one item to the register. The novel she had chosen. Clara scanned it and handed him the receipt. "You never told me your name." Adrian paused. For a brief second, he seemed to consider saying nothing at all. Then he answered simply, "Adrian." "I am Clara." He nodded once as if memorizing it. Clara watched him leave through the glass door and disappear into the rainy street. 10 minutes later, she locked up and stepped outside herself. Across the avenue, a black car waited beneath a streetlight. Adrian sat inside the back seat, the bookstore receipt still in his hand. On it, beneath the total, Clara had written in blue ink, "Do not forget to read chapter 12. It is the best part." Adrian returned to Bellamy Books 3 nights later, and then again the week after that. Clara noticed the pattern long before she mentioned it. He always arrived close to closing time. Always alone. Sometimes he bought a book. Sometimes he wandered the aisles without taking anything home at all. But he always ended up talking to her. "You are judging me again," Adrian said one evening as Clara stared at the untouched coffee beside him. Rain streaked the bookstore windows while soft piano music drifted from the back office radio. Clara leaned against the counter with her arms folded loosely. I am not judging you. Adrian lifted an eyebrow slightly. You looked at my coffee like it insulted you personally. Because you ordered black coffee and added 3 packets of sugar. And Clara smiled. That tells me you are secretly exhausted. Adrian stared at her quietly before looking down at the cup in his hand. Maybe you are right. The answer surprised even him. Clara noticed the shadow behind his eyes then. The exhaustion he carried like a permanent weight. She had met powerful men before at gala events and office meetings. Most of them spoke loudly. Adrian did not. He listened more than he talked. Sometimes his silence felt heavier than conversation itself. What do you do? She asked finally. Adrian glanced toward the shelves. Business. Clara laughed softly. That sounds suspiciously vague. It is supposed to. So you are mysterious on purpose? No, his gaze returned to her slowly. It just happens. Her cheeks warmed unexpectedly, and she looked away first. Across the store, old floorboards creaked as the owner locked the front entrance for the night. Clara checked the time and sighed quietly. Long day? Adrian asked. She nodded. My mother had another doctor appointment this morning before work. Adrian straightened slightly. Is she okay? Clara hesitated before answering. She will be. Medical bills just have terrible timing. Adrian looked down at the worn edge of the counter. I understand that. She smiled faintly. No offense, Adrian, but you do not exactly seem like someone struggling to pay hospital bills. For a second, something unreadable crossed his face. Almost guilt. Appearances can lie. Clara studied him curiously. She wanted to ask more, but something about him felt carefully locked away. Instead, she changed the subject and pulled her notebook from beneath the counter. Look. Adrian watched as she opened to a fresh sketch. A cozy bookstore cafe filled the page in soft pencil lines. Reading lamps, brick walls, coffee tables near a fireplace. At the center, she had drawn a small stage for poetry readings. This is what I want someday, Clara admitted quietly. Not something huge. Just a place where people feel less alone. Adrian said nothing for several seconds. His eyes moved across every detail she had drawn as though memorizing them. You made all this? It is silly. No, he said immediately. It is not. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Clara closed the notebook slowly. Dreams are expensive in New York. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable again. Some things are worth paying for. Later that night, after Clara left the bookstore and disappeared down the subway stairs, Adrian remained alone inside his car parked across the street. The city lights reflected against the tinted windows while his driver waited silently in front. Adrian pulled out his phone at last. Find out which hospital Clara Whitmore's mother uses, he said quietly, and pay every outstanding bill anonymously. The next morning, Clara nearly dropped her phone in the middle of the subway station. She stared at the email again while commuters rushed past her beneath the fluorescent lights. Payment received in full. She stopped walking completely. Her mother's hospital balance had disappeared overnight. Every invoice, every overdue charge, paid. Clara immediately called the billing office the second she reached the sidewalk outside Hawthorne Tower. There has to be some mistake, she said breathlessly. The woman on the line sounded cheerful. No mistake, Ms. Whitmore. An anonymous donor cleared the account this morning. Anonymous? Yes, ma'am. Clara lowered the phone slowly. Manhattan traffic roared around her. But for a moment, she heard nothing at all. All day the mystery followed her through the office like a shadow. She replayed every possibility in her head. Family friends, charity programs, administrative errors. None of it made sense. By evening, she still had no answers. Bellamy Books felt warmer than usual that night. The scent of coffee drifted through the shelves while rain tapped softly against the windows again. Clara stood behind the register distractedly organizing bookmarks when the bell above the door chimed. Adrian walked in carrying the same quiet energy that always changed the atmosphere around him. You look different tonight, he said immediately. Clara stared at him. Different good or different bad? Different lighter. She laughed softly and shook her head. Maybe lighter. Adrian studied her face carefully. Something happened. Clara hesitated before smiling. A miracle happened. Adrian remained silent, waiting. She stepped around the counter toward the reading area near the back of the store. My mother's medical debt disappeared this morning. Adrian followed slowly. Disappeared? Paid completely by some anonymous donor. Her eyes still carried disbelief. I kept thinking there had to be strings attached, but there are not. Adrian looked away briefly toward the bookshelf beside him. Maybe somebody wanted to help. People do not just spend thousands of dollars helping strangers. Some people do. Clara tilted her head curiously. You sound like you already know the person. Adrian's expression did not change. I know the world surprises you sometimes. Before Clara could answer, loud voices erupted near the front entrance. 3 men in expensive suits entered laughing too loudly, the sharp smell of cologne following them through the store. Clara recognized one immediately. Daniel Mercer, senior executive from Hawthorne, the same man who had scolded her during the gala. Daniel noticed Clara behind the counter and smirked. Whitmore, he said casually. You work every job in New York, or what? Clara forced a polite smile. Good evening, Mr. Mercer. Daniel glanced around the small bookstore dismissively. You are too smart to waste your life in places like this. His eyes drifted briefly toward Adrian seated near the reading table. And who is this? Adrian remained calm. A customer. Daniel laughed lightly before leaning closer to Clara across the counter. Careful with men who sit alone in bookstores. Usually means they are broke or hiding from something. Clara's smile faded slightly. Before she could respond, Adrian stood slowly from his chair. The warmth disappeared from his eyes completely. The entire room seemed to tighten around him. Or maybe, Adrian said quietly, they are simply looking for someplace better than rooms filled with arrogant people. Silence hit instantly. Daniel's smile stiffened. Clara looked between them in surprise. Adrian stepped closer to the counter, his gaze never leaving Daniel. Calm, controlled, but something underneath it had shifted. The bookstore remained silent long after Daniel Mercer and the others left. Even the jazz music seemed quieter. Clara stood behind the register pretending to organize receipts while her heart refused to slow down. Adrian had already returned to his chair by the reading corner, the novel still closed beside him. He looked calm again, too calm, as if the sharp edge from minutes earlier had never existed. You did not have to do that, Clara said softly when the last customer left. Adrian looked up. Do what? Defend me. He held her gaze for a second. Yes, I did. The answer came too quickly. Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated. A message from Hawthorne. Mandatory attendance. Executive Appreciation Gala. Friday night. Formal attire required. Clara sighed immediately. Adrian noticed. Bad news. Another company event. She slipped the phone away. Lots of rich people pretending they enjoy each other. A faint smile appeared in his eyes. Maybe somebody there will surprise you. Friday arrived cold and clear. The ballroom inside Hawthorne Tower glittered beneath crystal lights. Clara stood near the back wall in a navy dress borrowed from a coworker, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the fabric. Around her, executives moved easily through the room with practiced confidence. She still felt like an outsider in every one of these events. Then the atmosphere changed. The doors opened. Conversation stopped almost instantly. Clara turned automatically. Men in dark suits entered first. Not security exactly. Something quieter. More precise. The crowd parted before the man walking behind them. Adrian. He wore black again. Tailored this time. Impossibly composed. The room reacted before she understood why. Executives straightened. Board members moved forward immediately. Daniel Mercer nearly dropped the glass in his hand. Someone beside Clara whispered under their breath. Moretti is here. Another voice answered. The Adrian Moretti? Clara stopped breathing. At the front of the room, the chairman stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced warmly. Please welcome our honored guest and strategic partner, Mr. Adrian Moretti. Applause filled the ballroom. Clara did not hear any of it. Adrian lifted his eyes. Across the crowded room, they found her instantly. No hesitation. No surprise. As though he had been looking for her from the moment he walked in. Her stomach dropped. Business. Mysterious. Quiet man in a bookstore. Black coffee and late-night conversations. The anonymous kindness. The impossible calm. Every piece suddenly fit together. Clara took one step back. Then another. Adrian saw it happen. He moved immediately, leaving the people waiting around him without explanation. Clara. His voice reached her near the hallway entrance. She turned slowly. You lied. The words came out barely above a whisper. Adrian stopped in front of her. I never wanted to hurt you. Her eyes filled with disbelief. You let me tell you everything. Silence. My mother. My dreams. My life. Adrian looked at her as though losing the right words for the first time in years. And every word mattered. Clara shook her head softly. Who are you, Adrian? He answered quietly. The man from the bookstore. But for the first time since meeting him, Clara was not sure she believed him. Clara left the gala before the speeches ended. The cold air outside Hawthorne Tower hit her face the second the revolving doors closed behind her, but it did nothing to quiet the storm in her chest. She walked 3 blocks without direction before stopping beneath a subway entrance, her hands shaking around the strap of her purse. Adrian Moretti. The name echoed everywhere now. Headlines she had ignored. Articles she had never opened. Men lowering their voices when he entered a room. She thought about Bellamy Books. The black coffee. The quiet conversations. The way he had looked at her sketches like they mattered. None of it felt fake. That was the problem. The next evening Adrian arrived at Bellamy Books at exactly 7. Clara was not there. He came back the following night. The owner looked up from arranging magazines and smiled apologetically. Clara asked for the week off. Adrian stood still. Is she okay? She said she needed time. Time. The one thing Adrian had never believed in. Time solved business problems. Negotiations. Contracts. Not this. He left without buying anything. 2 days later, he sat alone inside his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan. The city glowed beneath floor-to-ceiling windows. Reports waited untouched on the desk. 3 meetings had already been canceled. His phone rang again. He ignored it. His eyes remained fixed on the blue bookstore receipt still resting beside his watch. Do not forget to read chapter 12. It is the best part. He had read it 3 times. Meanwhile, Clara spent every evening at home. Her mother noticed the change immediately. You are quieter, she said gently one night while folding laundry on the couch. Clara forced a smile. Just tired. Her mother studied her for a moment. Did somebody hurt you? Clara looked down at the bookmark with the pressed white flower resting in her hand. No, she whispered. That is the problem. Sunday afternoon brought the first snow of the season. Clara wrapped her coat tighter and walked without thinking until familiar windows stopped her. Bellamy Books. Closed for inventory. A handwritten sign hung on the door. She stood there longer than necessary. You came back. Clara turned instantly. Adrian stood a few feet away beneath the gray winter sky. No suit. No bodyguards. Just the dark coat she remembered from the beginning. Her heart betrayed her immediately. How did you find me? She asked quietly. I looked everywhere else first. Snow drifted softly between them. Clara lowered her eyes. You should not be here. Adrian stepped closer. Then tell me where I should be. She swallowed hard. With people like you. His expression changed. There are no people like me when I am with you. Silence. The city moved around them unnoticed. Clara looked up slowly. For the first time since the gala, Adrian seemed tired. Truly tired. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Just human. I did not lie about Bellamy Books, he said quietly. I did not lie about liking your dreams. Clara said nothing. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and held out the folded bookstore receipt she had written on weeks ago. And I definitely did not lie about chapter 12. Clara stared at the folded receipt in Adrian's hand while snow settled softly across the sidewalk. The blue ink was slightly faded now, but she still recognized her own handwriting immediately. He had kept it. For some reason that hurt more than the lie. Why did you not tell me? She asked quietly. Adrian lowered the receipt. Because the first time you looked at me, you saw a person. His voice remained calm. Not a name. Not a title. Clara looked away toward the bookstore windows. And you thought I would change after learning who you were? No, he paused. I thought the world around me would. The answer stayed with her long after they parted that afternoon. 3 days later, Clara received an email at work marked private invitation. No company logo. No explanation. Just an address in Brooklyn and a time. Saturday. 6 o'clock. She almost deleted it. Almost. The old warehouse stood near the waterfront where converted brick buildings had become cafes and art spaces over the years. Warm light spilled through the tall windows. Clara stepped inside carefully, then stopped. Shelves. Hundreds of them. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls beneath hanging brass lamps. Reading corners sat beside fireplaces. A small stage occupied the center exactly where she had drawn it. Coffee tables. Brick accents. Window seats overlooking the river. Every detail. Every impossible detail. Clara could not breathe. Adrian stood near the back of the room beside a wooden counter, still unfinished. He watched her silently. "What is this?" she whispered. Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the counter and opened something resting there. Her blue notebook. Clara froze. "How? You left it at Bellamy one night." He looked down at the sketches carefully. "I borrowed the dream." Tears filled her eyes before she realized it. Adrian turned the notebook toward her. A bookmark rested inside. The pressed white flower from her father. Protected now beneath glass. "You said dreams are expensive in New York," Adrian said quietly. "So I paid for one." Clara shook her head slowly. "Adrian." The building was empty for 3 years. He looked around the space. Bookstore, cafe, reading stage, community nights. Everything you drew. Her hand covered her mouth. Above the entrance hung unfinished letters covered by cloth. Adrian crossed the room and pulled it down gently. Whitmore Literary House. Clara closed her eyes immediately. "You cannot do things like this," she whispered through tears. Adrian stepped closer. "I know. Then why did you?" He looked at her the same way he had that first night at the gala. Completely. Quietly. "Because nobody ever built anything for you." Silence filled the room. Outside, snow continued falling over the river. Clara opened the notebook slowly. On the first page, beneath her original sketch, new handwriting had been added in dark ink. "For the girl nobody saw except me." She looked up. Adrian was already watching her. Not like a powerful man. Not like someone untouchable. Just the man from the bookstore who remembered Chapter 12. Spring arrived quietly in Brooklyn. The snow disappeared from the sidewalks. Window boxes filled with flowers. The river carried golden reflections each evening beneath the bridges. Whitmore Literary House opened on a Saturday morning under a clear blue sky. Clara stood near the entrance before sunrise holding the same blue notebook against her chest. The bookstore smelled like fresh wood, coffee, and new pages. Exactly the way she had imagined all those nights at her tiny desk beneath the apartment window. People began arriving before opening time. Neighbors, readers, families, students carrying notebooks and cameras. The reading corner filled first. Then the cafe tables. By noon, every chair was occupied. Clara moved through the space greeting guests with a smile she had forgotten she still knew how to wear. Her mother sat near the fireplace wrapped in a soft cream cardigan, watching everything with quiet tears in her eyes. The pressed white flower rested inside a glass frame beside the register. Under it a small card read, "Every dream deserves a place to live." Adrian arrived just after 3 in the afternoon. No announcement. No entourage. Just the dark coat Clara had first seen in Bellamy books. Some people recognized him immediately. Others did not. He ignored all of them. His eyes found Clara across the room the same way they always had. She walked toward him slowly. "You came." Adrian looked around the bookstore. Children sat reading on the floor near the fireplace. A local musician played soft piano beside the stage. Someone laughed near the coffee bar. "I never left," he answered quietly. Clara smiled before she could stop herself. Evening settled over the river in shades of gold and blue. The last guests drifted out one by one until the bookstore finally became quiet. Clara stood by the windows overlooking the water while city lights flickered alive outside. Adrian approached holding her blue notebook. "There is one page you never finished," he said softly. Clara looked down. He opened to the final blank sheet. Nothing drawn. Nothing written. "I was saving it," she admitted. "For what?" Adrian reached into his coat pocket and placed something small onto the page. Not diamonds. Not extravagance. A simple silver ring that caught the warm light from the lamps above. Clara looked up immediately. Adrian's voice remained calm, but his eyes did not. "For whatever comes after the dream." Silence filled the bookstore. The same shelves. The same lights. The same impossible place she once believed would never exist. Clara smiled through tears. "You know," she whispered, "I never finished Chapter 12 either." Adrian stepped closer. "Why?" Her fingers closed gently around the ring. "Because I was waiting for the ending." Outside, the river moved quietly beneath the city lights while inside Whitmore Literary House the final page of the blue notebook waited open between them, ready at last to become a new beginning.